The sun hung low over the jagged peaks of Zenthera, casting long, violent shadows across the alien landscape. The ground trembled as the roar of an unknown predator echoed through the valleys, a reminder that this was not a world for the faint of heart. Jonas Hayes, ex-soldier, ex-mercenary, now an outcast mechanic, felt the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on him. The cub was nearby. He could feel it, the air crackling with an unnatural tension. Jonas had heard the stories. The Xyroxy cub, born to become an apex predator, was the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. It had torn through civilizations, leaving nothing but blood and ash behind. No species had ever succeeded in taming it. Not even the most skilled warriors, the brightest scientists, or the bravest soldiers. All had fallen, crushed by its immense strength and cunning. Jonas had no illusions about his chances, but he had a plan. A simple, impossible plan that relied on something no one had ever considered: human ingenuity. He adjusted the straps of his utility belt, the tools hanging by his side. His fingers brushed against the edges of a plain cardboard box. It was laughable. The idea that something so simple, something so mundane, could possibly contain the key to taming the Xyroxy cub. But Jonas had learned long ago that the most brilliant solutions came from the most unlikely places. Illa, his only ally on this alien world, stood a few steps behind him, her green skin gleaming under the harsh sunlight. A member of the Tijan species, she was tall, with elongated limbs and eyes that glimmered with an intelligence beyond her years. Illa was different. She wasn't like the other aliens who feared the cub and what it represented. She believed in Jonas. "I don't understand," she said softly, her voice a smooth, melodic hum. "This is insane, Jonas. No one has ever." Jonas cut her off with a look, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "I know, Illa, but that's exactly why we have to try." He reached into the box and pulled out a thin strip of wire. "I've studied the Xyroxy. Their instincts, their nature, they're not like us, but they're not invincible either. They're animals." "Animals?" Illa's expression darkened. "You can't compare them to anything on your world. The Xyroxy are far beyond anything you've ever faced." Jonas didn't respond right away. He adjusted the wire, ensuring it was tightly coiled. His heart raced as he imagined the cub, a creature unlike anything Earth had ever seen. He didn't fear it. He didn't fear anything anymore. He had nothing left to lose. The plan was simple: human ingenuity. It wasn't about force. It wasn't about weapons. It was about understanding the creature, seeing beyond its raw power. Most species that tried to control the Xyroxy had failed because they didn't understand them. They treated the cub like a force to be dominated. But Jonas knew better. "Let's move," he muttered to Illa, his voice steady. They began the trek toward the dense forest where the cub had last been spotted. The ground beneath them was soft, covered in moss, the trees towering like ancient sentinels. Silence reigned, broken only by the rustling of leaves. As they neared the cub's den, the tension in the air became palpable. Jonas could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. The earth trembled once again, this time with a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. And then out of the shadows it emerged. The cub was larger than anything Jonas had expected. Its red eyes gleamed like molten fire, locked on him with an intelligence that sent a chill down his spine. It moved with the fluidity of a predator, its sleek, muscular body rippling under the dark fur. It growled. The sound was deafening, an echo of death. Jonas didn't flinch. He held up the cardboard box. "Stay calm, Illa," he whispered. "Trust me." Illa stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief as the cub crept closer, its sharp teeth bared. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The world held its breath. And then, without hesitation, Jonas dropped to one knee, lifting the box and slowly, deliberately covering his face. He could hear the cub's growls growing louder. His heartbeat matched its pace. The cub stopped. Jonas dared a quick glance over the top of the box. The cub stared at him, confused. Its massive head tilted slightly, as if trying to understand this strange, fragile human who had the audacity to face it down without weapons. The silence that followed was deafening. Jonas had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time he felt the pulse of the planet shift. The tension in the air softened. For a split second, the cub's growl turned into a low, rumbling purr. And that was when it lunged. Illa screamed, but Jonas didn't move. He let the cub get closer, the sharp claws grazing the cardboard box, the air thick with the scent of predator and prey. The cub sniffed the box, paws pressing against it, its massive body twisting and turning in confusion. Jonas held his ground, heart hammering in his chest. The box was his only shield. The darkness enveloped Jonas like a heavy blanket. He could feel the ground beneath him, cold and unforgiving, but he couldn't make sense of the world around him. His ears rang from the cub's deafening roar, and his chest felt tight. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. Was he still alive? Slowly, his vision began to clear. The blur of shadows receded, and he could see the outlines of trees and the flickering light of a distant fire. Illa's voice reached him, distant but clear, a thread of panic cutting through the haze. Jonas, Jonas, wake up. He blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the disorientation. His eyes focused, and he saw her standing nearby, her body tense, but her face filled with concern. He was still kneeling, the remains of the cardboard box scattered around him like confetti. Jonas, you need to get up, Illa urged, her voice shaking. The cub. Jonas shook his head to clear the fog. I'm fine, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. What happened? Illa took a cautious step forward. It stopped. It didn't attack. But Jonas, you're pushing your luck too far. That thing is a monster. You can't tame it with a box. It doesn't work that way. Jonas pushed himself up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in his limbs. His heart still raced, and his mind struggled to process what had just happened. The cub had stopped. It had hesitated. The thing that had killed countless beings across the galaxy had shown a moment of uncertainty when faced with a human, a weak, fragile species in comparison. Maybe I'm wrong, he murmured, more to himself than to Illa. Maybe it's not about fighting. Maybe it's about making it see something different. Illa was silent for a moment, her eyes flicking from the cub, which now paced warily at the edge of the clearing, to Jonas. You're talking about trust, she said softly. But the Xyroxy don't trust anything. They dominate, they destroy, it's in their blood. Jonas stood up straighter, his eyes never leaving the cub. The creature still hovered on the edge of the clearing, its eyes fixed on Jonas, glowing in the dim light. It was silent now, watching him with an almost eerie curiosity. I don't know if I trust it either, Jonas admitted, but I've got a feeling it's not as lost as you think. Illa's expression softened, but there was a clear sadness in her eyes. Jonas, you're not from this world. You don't understand what they're capable of. I've seen a lot in my time, Illa. More than you know, I've fought wars. I've seen how creatures like this are tamed. Not through violence, but through understanding. Illa sighed, the wind rustling her long, green hair. What are you going to do now? The Xyroxy High Council is already suspicious of you. If they find out you're trying to control their cub, you'll be branded a traitor. Jonas was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The Xyroxy High Council, the ruling body of this alien planet, had ruled with an iron fist for centuries, maintaining control through fear, violence, and oppression. They saw the cub as a weapon, something to be revered and feared. Jonas had already made an enemy of them. If he succeeded in taming the cub, it could mean his death. But if he failed, "I'll deal with them when the time comes," he said finally. "First, I need to understand the cub, really understand it. If I can do that, maybe it can lead to something bigger than just survival." Illa stepped forward, her eyes narrowing with concern. "What are you thinking?" Jonas didn't look away from the cub. "I think it's about more than taming it. I think it's about teaching it that there's more than just dominance. Maybe the Xyroxy have forgotten what it means to trust. Maybe the cub can show them." Illa shook her head, disbelief written on her face. "You're insane, you know that." "I know," Jonas said with a grin, though there was a hint of unease in his voice. "But if there's one thing humans are good at, it's making the impossible happen." Illa seemed torn. "You're going to make the Xyroxy see humanity as an equal just like that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe not an equal," Jonas said, his voice tinged with an ironic bitterness. "But I'm going to make them see us as something more than prey." The tension in the air grew thicker as the cub crept closer, its glowing eyes never leaving Jonas. He could feel its presence, the weight of its gaze like a force pressing against him. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The ground trembled again, and Jonas didn't know whether to move or stay still. Illa whispered, barely audible, "It's testing you, Jonas." "I know," Jonas murmured, his hand subtly reaching for the small pouch at his belt. Inside it, a tiny, intricate device, nothing more than a few wires and a sensor, lay in wait. It was a last resort, an emergency backup if things went wrong. But Jonas didn't want to use it. He wanted the cub to trust him on its own. The cub's growl rumbled again, low and unsettling. Its body coiled like a spring, ready to strike. Jonas didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Slowly, he crouched down, keeping his movements fluid, non-threatening. He extended one hand, palm open, toward the cub. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Just a little closer." For a moment, nothing happened. The cub remained still, eyeing him with a mix of curiosity and hostility. The air seemed to hang between them, charged with the weight of 1,000 years of instinct. Then, with a soft but unmistakable sound, the cub took a step closer. Jonas held his breath. And then, in one swift motion, the cub lunged. Cliffhanger, but instead of attacking, the cub hesitated at the last moment, its powerful jaws stopping just inches from Jonah's hand. Its breath, hot and ragged, blew across his skin. It stared at him, eyes wide with what could almost be called confusion. Jonas could feel the cub's heartbeat through the air between them, racing as fast as his own. And then, just as suddenly, the cub pulled back, its body trembling. It turned and darted into the shadows, vanishing into the night. Jonas didn't move. What had just happened? Did the cub trust him, or was this just another game? Jonas sat motionless, his eyes still locked on the spot where the cub had vanished into the underbrush. The air felt heavy, thick with uncertainty. His breath came in shallow bursts, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He could hardly believe it. The cub had actually pulled back. It had hesitated. I think it worked," Jonas whispered under his breath, the words almost sounding like a question. He glanced over at Illa, who stood frozen, her face a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Jonas, that was impossible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one has ever made the cub back down, and you—" "I didn't make it back down," Jonas cut in, his voice quiet but resolute. "I just showed it something different. I showed it that not all humans are the same, that we're not just here to take or kill. Illa stood motionless for a long moment, digesting his words. She finally nodded, but there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. You may have stopped it today, but that doesn't mean it's tamed. It doesn't mean it won't turn on you the moment you let your guard down. Jonas didn't argue. He knew that this was only the beginning. The cub was wild, unpredictable. He had to prove that it could be something more, something better than what the Xyroxy had made it to be. But every species had its limits, and humans were nothing if not stubborn. I know, he said finally, standing up and brushing the dust from his knees. But I also know that we can change things. If this works, if we can make the Xyroxy see that the cub can be something else, something better, then maybe we can stop this endless war. The Xyroxy, as Jonas had learned in his years living among alien species, were not a race that believed in change. They were proud, their society built on dominance and strength. Their way of life was entrenched in tradition, and tradition demanded that the strongest rule. Weakness, compassion, understanding was a concept they did not entertain. That was why the cub was such a threat. It embodied their deepest desires, their greatest fear, and their darkest power. If Jonas succeeded, it wouldn't just change the fate of the cub. It would change the very foundation of Xyroxy society. The gravity of what he was attempting weighed heavily on him. He knew the risk. The Xyroxy High Council would not tolerate this. They would see it as a betrayal, a challenge to their very way of life. And yet, Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that if he didn't try, no one would. He turned to Illa, his face grim. We need to get to the Xyroxy capital. I'll show them the cub. I'll prove that it's possible to do things differently. Illa shook her head. You're asking for trouble. The High Council is not going to just let you waltz in and change their entire way of life. They'll see you as a threat. Jonas didn't look away. They'll see me as a threat anyway. I'm already a threat. I've already defied them. If I can't make them listen, I don't know how much longer we can stay here. They made their way back to the settlement, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Xyroxy were everywhere, silent, calculating. He knew that if they had any inkling of his plan, they'd come for him without hesitation. The settlement was a mess of alien architecture and makeshift shelters, constructed by various species in a hasty attempt to create some form of peace. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and alien spices. The Tijan had their home here too, but Illa didn't seem to mind the chaos. She had grown used to it. Jonas, on the other hand, was always on edge. As they approached the center of the settlement, Jonas' thoughts raced. He had to move quickly. Time was running out. The Xyroxy High Council would never allow him to keep the cub alive. They would see it as a challenge to their rule, an insult. But if they could just see the cub for what it could be, maybe there was a chance. Illa led Jonas to a secluded room deep within the settlement. Inside, a few members of her species sat around a glowing table, discussing matters that seemed too delicate to be overheard. They looked up as Jonas entered, but Illa raised her hand in a gesture of caution. These are my people, she said softly, her voice filled with authority. They'll help, but you have to understand this is bigger than you. The Xyroxy aren't just a species, they're a force. You're asking us to risk everything if we fail. Jonas swallowed, the gravity of her words sinking in. I know the stakes, Illa, but if we don't do this now, then all of this. He gestured to the settlement, to the war-torn land beyond. It's all for nothing. The group exchanged hesitant glances, the weight of their decision clear in their eyes. Finally, a tall, elder Tijan with streaks of silver in his green skin spoke. You're asking us to trust you, human, trust your people. But if you fail, we will all pay the price." Jonas nodded. "I'm not asking for trust, I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to prove that we can do things differently. We have to try." The group agreed to help him. The Tijan were skilled in technology and medicine, and they provided Jonas with a small, sophisticated device that would allow him to communicate with the Xyroxy without using words, a non-threatening way to connect. It was a last-ditch effort, a way to bypass the traditional methods of power that the Xyroxy held so dear. Jonas secured the device in his pack and turned to Illa. "This is it. We're going to the High Council." The High Council's palace was a massive structure, dark and intimidating, built into the side of a cliff overlooking the vast expanse of the planet's jungle. The palace seemed almost alive, its surfaces covered in strange, alien symbols that pulsed with an inner light. It was here that Jonas would either succeed or die. As they approached the grand entrance, the two guards standing watch didn't move. Jonas felt his palms sweat. Every step felt like it was echoing in the silence. There was no turning back. A cliffhanger. The door opened slowly, and Jonas stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The Xyroxy High Council sat in a semicircle, their glowing eyes fixed on him with unblinking intensity. "You dare to come here, human?" A deep, gravelly voice boomed. The voice came from the tallest figure, his form imposing and regal. "You have defied the will of the Xyroxy. You have shown our cub weakness. Why should we allow you to live?" Jonah's throat went dry. He swallowed hard, his hand instinctively brushing against the device in his pack. "I'm not here to challenge your authority," he said, his voice firm despite the growing fear. "I'm here to offer you a new path, a path that could save us all." The room fell into an eerie silence, every Xyroxy leader staring at Jonas like he was something they had never seen before. The air thickened, heavy with anticipation. And then the tallest figure rose. "Prove it, human." Jonah's heart skipped a beat as the Xyroxy High Council member rose from his seat. The towering figure's shadow stretched over him, a silent threat hanging in the air. The room seemed to shrink as Jonah stood his ground, his mind racing for the right words, the right action. The High Council member, Tivar, the oldest and most respected of the Xyroxy, towered above him, his eyes glowing with an unsettling red light. The other members of the council sat still, their expressions unreadable. Jonas could feel the weight of their collective gaze pressing down on him. "I have heard much of your human ingenuity." Tivar's voice was deep, vibrating through the floor, making it clear that every word was a judgment. "But it seems you have mistaken our ways for weakness." Jonas swallowed, the pit in his stomach deepening. The tension in the room could be cut with a knife, and it was clear that his survival depended on how well he played this moment. He could feel the sweat on his palms, but he didn't let it show. There was no turning back now. "I'm not here to undermine your ways," Jonas said, his voice steady. "I'm here to show you something else, something that could change everything." Tivar's glowing eyes narrowed. What could a human possibly offer us that we do not already know? Jonas took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "I'm offering you a chance to see something that's been buried in your society for centuries. Compassion, understanding. A way to make your people stronger, not by ruling through fear, but by embracing something new." Tivar tilted his head slightly, an action Jonas had come to recognize as curiosity. "Compassion," the word was foreign on his tongue. "We are warriors. Our strength lies in our ability to dominate, to rule, to destroy. What would compassion offer us?" Jonas glanced over his shoulder, catching Illa's eye. She was standing by the door, watching intently. He could see the doubt in her expression, but there was also a flicker of hope. He could do this. He had to. "It will offer you the ability to lead," Jonas said, stepping forward. "Not through fear, but through respect. To make your people stronger by teaching them something they've forgotten, something that humans have always had, even when we were at our weakest. We fight for what we love, not for what we fear." The Xyroxy Council fell silent again, their expressions unreadable. Jonas could feel the weight of their thoughts, the centuries of tradition that shaped their every action, weighing heavily on them. Tivar's voice broke the silence, quiet and calculated. "And you believe that we should follow a human, a species that has been weak for so long?" Jonas stood his ground. "I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to follow the example of something you've never considered. The cub, I've seen it. I've been with it. It's not just a weapon. It's a creature capable of more. It can be something greater if you'll allow it." The air crackled with tension. For a moment, Jonas thought the council might reject him outright, but Tivar's eyes flickered and a shift seemed to pass over him. The elder stepped back, his gaze still fixed on Jonas. "You speak of trust, of compassion, yet you do not even understand our ways." "I understand more than you think," Jonas replied, keeping his tone even. "I've seen how your species treats the weak, the old, the injured. Your strength is in your ability to survive, to destroy. But that doesn't make you the strongest. It makes you the most isolated." Tivar's eyes narrowed even further. He raised one clawed hand, as if to silence Jonas, but Jonas wasn't finished. "Every species needs something beyond war," Jonas continued. "I'm asking you to see that. The cub can lead you into a future where strength isn't just about survival, it's about connection, about trust. If you can't see that, then I'm sorry, Tivar, but you're missing the point." For a long moment, the Xyroxy elder said nothing. The tension in the room thickened, suffocating Jonas with every passing second. His chest tightened as he waited, heart pounding in his throat. Finally, Tivar lowered his hand. The council members exchanged glances, their eyes flicking between Jonas and the elder. It was clear that whatever decision was made now would alter the course of their future. Tivar's voice was low, measured. "You speak of connection, human, but you know nothing of the bond between a species and its cub. To tame the Xyroxy is to tame the very essence of what we are." "I know," Jonas said, his voice steady, "but that's why we have to change. If the cub can learn to trust me, then maybe we can learn to trust each other." Tivar stared at him for a long time, his eyes glinting in the low light of the room. Then, finally, he nodded slowly. "I will give you the chance to prove your words. Show us this cub. If you succeed, we will consider your path." The room erupted into murmurs, the council members exchanging hushed words. Jonas held his breath. This was it. He had just been given a lifeline, a chance to show the Xyroxy that there was more to strength than violence and fear. But it wouldn't be easy. If the cub didn't trust him, if he failed to show the council that there was a way forward, it could all come crashing down. Jonas turned toward Illa, his expression a mix of determination and fear. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, his voice low. She nodded, her face filled with both hope and caution. "I know, but this is the only chance we have. We have to make it work." Jonas felt a flicker of something, a small ember of hope. It was a fragile thing, like a flickering candle in the dark, but it was there. And for the first time in a long while, he believed it might be enough. The journey to the cub's den felt endless. Every step was filled with the weight of what was at stake. Jonas had always been a soldier, trained to survive, to fight. But this was different. This was about showing something greater than himself. It was about changing the hearts of an entire species. Cliffhanger. They arrived at the clearing where the cub had last been seen. The moonlight cast eerie shadows over the landscape, the air thick with the scent of the jungle. Jonas hesitated for a moment, his hand on the device at his side. If this failed, if the cub didn't respond. Suddenly there was a rustling in the underbrush. Jonas stiffened, his eyes scanning the shadows. Then, from the darkness, the cub emerged. It was larger now, stronger, and its eyes gleamed with an unsettling hunger. Jonas held his breath. But this time the cub didn't roar, it didn't lunge. Instead, it stopped. The cub's eyes glowed in the dim moonlight, its massive frame imposing against the darkened backdrop of the jungle. It was a beast of raw power, a living embodiment of the Xyroxy's dominance. But tonight it did not roar. It did not charge at Jonas or Illa. Instead, it simply stood there, watching, as though it too was waiting for something. Jonas' breath caught in his throat. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, the air thick with tension. The cub's powerful limbs rippled with muscle, but it did not move forward. It was a dangerous gamble, but Jonas had come too far to turn back now. He took a cautious step forward, his voice low but steady. "It's okay, I'm here to help you." The cub's gaze never wavered. It was as if it were considering him, weighing his words. For all of its terrifying strength, there was something almost childlike in the way it studied Jonas. It was a creature born of violence, raised to conquer, yet there was a flicker of something else, something softer, hidden beneath the surface. Jonas extended his hand slowly, palm open, offering no threat. "You don't have to fight anymore. We can both be something different. You can show them that there's another way." Illa stood a few paces behind him, her eyes wide, both hopeful and fearful. She had never seen the cub behave this way before. Neither had Jonas. But he knew that the cub was not just a weapon. It was a reflection of everything the Xyroxy were. It was a test, and if he failed now, all would be lost. The cub's nostrils flared as it took a cautious step forward. Its powerful muscles coiled, and for a brief moment, Jonas thought it might attack. But instead, the cub lowered its head, bringing it level with Jonas' outstretched hand. There was a softness in its movements, a hesitation like it was unsure of the human before it. Jonas held his breath, trying not to flinch as the cub's hot breath washed over him. The predator was so close now, its teeth sharp and glinting in the moonlight. But it did not strike. Instead, it sniffed his hand, the tension in the air mounting with every passing second. Then, to Jonas' shock, the cub did something unexpected. It gently nudged his hand with its nose. Illa gasped, "Jonas, is it?" Jonas couldn't believe it. The cub, the creature that had been the nightmare of every species in the galaxy, was trusting him, just like that. The realization hit him hard, his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't a victory yet, not by a long shot, but it was a start. A small crack in the armor of an entire civilization's beliefs. But as the cub stepped back, Jonas felt a shift in the air. Something was wrong. The ground trembled. From the shadows, a voice called out, "Stop right there, human." Jonas' heart dropped. The Xyroxy High Council had arrived. They had been watching from the trees, their figures emerging from the darkness like specters of authority. Tivar was at the forefront, his eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. Behind him, the other council members loomed, silent and menacing. "You have betrayed us," Tivar continued, his voice cold and commanding. "You have made a mockery of everything we stand for." Jonas straightened, unwilling to back down now. The cub, sensing the rising tension, let out a low growl but stayed in place, its eyes flickering between Jonas and the approaching Xyroxy. "I didn't betray you, Tivar," Jonas said, his voice firm. I'm showing you something you've never allowed yourselves to see. The cub doesn't have to be a weapon. It doesn't have to be a tool for war. It can lead you into something new, something better. Tivar's eyes flashed with anger. The cub is no different than any other Xyroxy. It was born to fight, to conquer. And you... You're wrong, Jonas cut him off, his voice rising with emotion. You're trapped in your own traditions. The cub isn't a weapon. It's a creature capable of more. If you just let go of your need to control, to dominate everything in sight, you'd see that. The Xyroxy are more than just warriors. You're more than just your traditions. Tivar's expression darkened. You dare speak of our traditions. You think your puny human ideals can change what has existed for centuries. I'm not trying to change everything, Jonas said, his voice low but filled with resolve. I'm trying to show you that there's another way, a way that doesn't rely on fear and bloodshed. You've spent centuries ruling through dominance. But that doesn't make you strong, it makes you isolated. You've built a civilization based on fear, and fear is a prison. The air was thick with tension, every Xyroxy warrior around them on edge. The High Council was silent, their expressions unreadable. But Jonas could feel the weight of their judgment, the weight of their centuries-old traditions pressing down on him. Tivar's lips curled into a sneer. You're a fool, human. You don't understand the Xyroxy. Our strength is our tradition, our dominance, our control. Jonas stood his ground, his eyes steady, his hands clenched at his sides. No, your strength lies in your people, in your ability to adapt, to grow. You can't dominate everything. The Xyroxy have more to offer than just destruction. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The cub's growls faded, and the High Council members looked between each other, as if considering Jonah's words. Tivar stared at Jonas, his eyes narrowing. You're asking us to abandon everything we are, to risk everything we've built. I'm not asking you to abandon anything, Jonas said, his voice steady. I'm asking you to see that your greatest strength is your ability to change. That's what will make the Xyroxy truly unstoppable. The ground shook as the Xyroxy warriors advanced, their eyes glowing with fury. Tivar, standing tall at the forefront, exuded an aura of unrelenting authority. The tension was so thick Jonas could barely breathe, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like an invisible force. Every instinct he had screamed at him to run, to retreat to safety, but something deep inside held him firm. The cub, still standing at his side, seemed equally aware of the impending conflict. Its muscles tensed, its powerful body poised for action. But it didn't attack. It watched the approaching Xyroxy with an uncertain gaze, its sharp teeth bared in an unsettling mix of defiance and fear. Illa, standing behind Jonas, whispered urgently, Jonas, you have to get out of here. Now, the High Council won't hesitate. They're going to kill you. Jonas didn't look back. His gaze was fixed on Tivar and the approaching warriors, the sound of their heavy footfalls growing louder with each passing second. No, Jonas said, his voice firm but filled with a mixture of resolve and desperation. I'm not running, not this time. The Xyroxy High Council members stopped just a few paces away from him, their glowing eyes locked on his every movement. The air was thick with hostility, and every muscle in Jonah's body was tense, ready for anything. He could feel the Xyroxy's hate and suspicion bearing down on him, a pressure like a weight on his chest. They were not only threatening him, they were threatening everything he had worked for. Tivar spoke again, his voice cold and menacing. You are a fool, human. You dare come into our home and tell us how to live. You believe your words will change centuries of tradition. You are nothing more than an insect to us. Jonas took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. I'm not here to change your past, Tivar. I'm here to offer you a future. A future where you don't have to rule through fear, where you don't have to fight every battle like it's your last. T-Var's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. And what future do you offer, human? One where we abandon our strength, our pride, where we let weakness reign. Jonas held his ground, the weight of his words echoing in the tense silence. No, a future where you're not defined by your ability to dominate. A future where you can be strong without having to break everything in your path. That's the future I'm offering. That's the future I want for the cub and for all of you. For a moment, T-Var said nothing. The room was still, the only sound the distant rustling of the jungle. Jonas could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, knowing that whatever came next would decide his fate. It was a gamble, but it was the only hand he had left to play. Then, without warning, the cub stepped forward, its massive form moving silently through the clearing. Its eyes, still locked on T-Var and the High Council, glowed faintly in the darkness. The Xyroxy warriors shifted uneasily, clearly unsure of what to make of the cub's actions. Jonas held his breath. Was this it? Had he pushed too far? Would the cub finally turn on him? But the cub didn't attack. Instead, it moved closer to Jonas, its body tense but not aggressive. The Xyroxy watched in stunned silence as the creature circled around Jonas, its eyes fixed on T-Var. Then, to everyone's surprise, the cub sat down beside Jonas, its posture submissive but still strong, almost like a silent plea for understanding. T-Var's eyes widened slightly, the slightest flicker of doubt passing across his face. For a brief moment, the room was filled with nothing but the rustling of the wind and the distant sounds of the jungle. The High Council was unsure how to react. Even the warriors, hardened as they were, hesitated. Illa, her voice barely a whisper, spoke up. It's showing them. It's showing them that it can trust. It's showing them that it can be more than just a weapon. Jonas nodded, but his focus remained on T-Var. This is your chance, T-Var, you can see it. The cub isn't a tool for war. It's a living being capable of compassion. And if you can learn to see that, then maybe you can see that the Xyroxy can be more than just conquerors. You can be something greater. T-Var stood silent, his gaze shifting from Jonas to the cub. For the first time, Jonas saw a flicker of something other than contempt in the elder's eyes, a glimmer of curiosity, perhaps even something close to hesitation. For what felt like an eternity, T-Var did not speak. He simply stared, his mind clearly at war with itself. The tension in the air was unbearable. Jonas couldn't tell if he had won or if he was about to lose everything. Finally, T-Var spoke, his voice low but laced with a strange combination of respect and defiance. You speak of compassion, of change, but the Xyroxy are not weak. We are born to fight, to dominate. Our strength is what has kept us alive, and it is what will keep us alive. Jonah's heart sank, but he refused to back down. Strength isn't just about fighting. Strength is about knowing when to fight and knowing when to stand down. It's about the courage to change, to grow, to evolve. T-Var stepped forward, his massive form looming over Jonas. You dare to lecture me on strength, human? His voice was cold, but there was an underlying tremor of something else. You have no idea what it means to live as we do, to fight for every breath. You are weak, and yet you stand here telling us that we are wrong. Jonas didn't flinch. Maybe, but I've seen more strength in the cub than I've seen in the entire Xyroxy race. It's not about domination, it's about choice. You don't have to fight every battle with claws and teeth. There's another way, and I'm asking you to choose it. The moment stretched on like an eternity, the weight of T-Var's words sinking in. Jonah's mind raced as he tried to assess the situation. The High Council had always ruled with an iron fist, but now, for the first time, it seemed there was a crack in their armor. Tivar was angry, no doubt about that, but there was something else, something that made Jonas hesitate. Could this really work? He glanced at the cub, still sitting silently beside him, its glowing eyes never leaving Tivar. The cub's quiet presence was a reminder of everything Jonas had fought for. The future of the Xyroxy and their entire civilization might just hinge on this one fragile moment. Tivar finally spoke, his voice cold but with an undertone of curiosity that Jonas hadn't expected. You speak of change, but every Xyroxy warrior is trained to fight from the moment they are born. We live and die by the hunt. You think that you can simply erase all that we are with your words and your pitiful compassion. Jonah's eyes narrowed, his voice gaining strength. I don't want to erase what you are, Tivar. I want to show you something more. You're not just predators, you're more than that. But you have to be willing to see it. Tivar's nostrils flared, his eyes glowing brighter. I see what you are doing, human. You are trying to convince us to lay down our claws and bow to your way of life. But the Xyroxy will not kneel. We will not become weak. The air between them crackled with tension. Jonas had reached the point of no return. He could feel the eyes of the entire High Council on him. If he failed, it would mean death, not just for him, but for everything he had come to believe in. But if he succeeded... Jonas squared his shoulders. Strength is not defined by domination, it's about unity. The Xyroxy can be stronger than ever, but not by forcing others to fear you. By making allies, by learning how to trust. You don't have to keep fighting wars to prove you're strong. Tivar's eyes flickered, a brief moment of uncertainty flashing across his face. For the first time, the elder seemed to consider Jonah's words, his expression softening ever so slightly. Jonas knew that now more than ever he had to push. I know you think you're strong, Tivar. I've seen it in your eyes, the pride, the history, the power. But strength isn't just about what you can crush. It's about what you can protect. If you could learn to trust, if you could let go of that constant need to dominate, you would see that the Xyroxy could be something more than the most feared species in the galaxy. You could be leaders in a new era. A united galaxy, not one divided by war. Jonah's words hung in the air, and for the first time since they had arrived, the High Council was silent. Tivar's eyes studied him intently, his expression unreadable. The other Xyroxy warriors shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, perhaps wondering what was happening. But then the moment was shattered. The cub, still watching intently, suddenly rose to its feet. It took a step toward the High Council, its sharp claws clicking against the ground. The warriors instinctively tensed, their hands resting on the hilts of their weapons. But the cub didn't attack. It stood in front of Tivar, its posture bold but not aggressive. The elder Xyroxy stared at the cub, his eyes narrowing. Jonas felt a sense of dread wash over him. What if this was it? What if the cub turned on them all? But then, unexpectedly, the cub lowered its head, bowing slightly in a gesture of submission. The movement was slow, almost deliberate, as though it had been trained. As though it was accepting something, trust, maybe. And for the first time, the Xyroxy warriors seemed uncertain, their eyes flicking between the cub and their leader. Jonas took a cautious step forward, his heart racing. It's showing you, Tivar. It's showing you that trust can be a sign of strength. The cub isn't submitting, it's offering you a choice, a new way forward. Tivar's eyes flicked to Jonas, then back to the cub. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then finally he spoke, his voice low and gravely. You think that trust will win this war? You think that the Xyroxy can be tamed, that we can simply walk away from centuries of bloodshed and domination? Jonas shook his head. I'm not asking you to walk away from your history, Tivar. I'm asking you to build a future, one where you don't have to conquer everyone around you. You've been ruling with fear, but that fear is making you weak. It's dividing your people. The Xyroxy don't have to be alone. You can make a choice, Tivar. The cub is showing you that. All you have to do is see it. Tivar stared at Jonas, his eyes blazing with intensity. For a moment, Jonas thought the elder would lash out in anger, but then something in Tivar's eyes shifted. It was subtle, but it was there. A flicker of something human, something familiar, doubt. The same doubt that had plagued Jonas from the moment he'd started this journey. The tension in the air was thick, and Jonas knew that the next words Tivar spoke would determine everything. The cub, still standing before the High Council, let out a soft growl, as if urging Tivar to make a choice. Finally, Tivar spoke, his voice strained but softer than it had been before. You ask for too much, human, but perhaps you are right. Jonah's heart pounded in his chest. Was this it? Was Tivar finally seeing the possibility of something more? The High Council remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Tivar stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Jonah's. You speak of compassion, of strength through unity, but if this is to work, if the Xyroxy are to change, we must first prove that we can trust one another, that we can trust you. I will not allow this to be a fool's errand. Jonas stood tall, his heart racing. This was the moment. Then let's prove it together. Tivar looked down at the cub, who was still standing in front of him, its head lowered in what seemed like a gesture of respect. The elder's eyes softened ever so slightly. We will see if your words ring true, human. But if you fail, if you mislead us, you will not only fail yourself, you will fail the entire galaxy. Jonas nodded, his voice resolute. I understand, but I won't fail you, not this time.